New York City Lab School, Noel Spangler writes his impressions. The particular model at the Museum of Modern Art, the Wright exhibit, which interested me the most was Ward W. Willett's house, Highland Park, Illinois. From observing this architectural piece, I could see that most of the windows encompassing it were rectangular. However, some were square as well. Certain rectangular windows stretched horizontally, and a few stretched vertically. Each one had a dark brown frame with rather dark glass screens. A number had shutters on them with gentle sloping roofs coming over to shade from the sunlight. The entrances basically coincided with the windows. They were rectangular in shape with brown framing around each. A few of the doors consisted of window panes, and some had steps leading to the entrances. The roofs included in the model were mainly at angles over 90 degrees in comparison to the walls. The walls also had thick brown horizontal ridges going across them, which seemed to correspond with the edges of the roofs. The walls and the roofs were simply just similar flat planes, but at different angles in correlation with one another. They were both flat surfaces, somehow being connected to each other. The segments of the model ranged in a variety of geometric shapes. These included rectangles, squares, triangles, isosceles and acute, parallelograms, and trapezoids, all strung together in three-dimensional form. From looking at various views of the building, I indeed had separate feelings as my eyes wandered around the structure. Each perspective had its own special features. There are certain segments that jutted out at different positions, allowing a feeling of depth and dimension to stand out in my mind. The view which I happened to find the most exciting was the perspective between the rear and the side of the house. It happened to be the most spacious and open-angled, enabling the observer to see three large segments at disparate positions at the same time. From viewing the outside, the building seemed to create a feeling of largeness which existed throughout the irregularly built segments. From the windows, this space appeared dark, as if it would give the occupant a sense of privacy, conveyed by the closed-off screens of the exterior. On the other hand, from thinking about the subject and observing the interior unit and design, I noticed that there were actually a large number of windows with a lot of light seeping through the bars, which would sensibly provide more outdoor exposure rather than a closed and private environment. Still, the interior did seem as dark as I had surmised. It created a feeling of bareness and emptiness. The interior was organic, yet rather holy and religious looking as well. The wooden and earthy colors and textures of the exterior certainly seemed to substantiate this feeling, the inner and outer parts of the house being quite similar in these aspects and connected with nature. As I looked again to view the interior pictured on the wall, I could see that the walls were especially wide apart and spacious, with a ceiling that was undoubtedly spacious. Each segment seemed as if it would be enormous in standard comparison. Despite this, the exterior of the piece still seemed to create more aerial space than the interior, particularly the addition of porches, balconies, and chimneys outside. It covered a vast piece of land, giving it a definite sense of largeness and wideness from its outer appearance. The interior design was more explicitly detailed. This last clip from The Architecture of Frank Lloyd Wright.
My father was the man who taught me to regard a symphony as an edifice of sound. And when he told me that, I was a youngster, who I may have been 10 years old, I began to listen to music as a kind of building. It seems to me that music is a kind of sublimated mathematics. Well, so is architecture. Kind of sublimated mathematics. In the same sense that music sublimates mathematics, so architecture does. And there lies the great relationship and the warm kinship between music and architecture.
Wright achieved his effects without the aid of historical devices. The old Mayan god of fire placed here above the hearth by the home's first owner disappointed Wright. He felt his house owed its spirit to the original architecture of the Americas. But the design was his, and his alone.
I never sit down to a drawing board, and this has been a lifelong practice of mine until I have the whole thing in my mind. I may alter it, but unless I have the idea of the thing, and pretty well in shape, you won't see me at a drawing board.
Who would guess that this remote Pennsylvania stream would relaunch the career of the 70-year-old architect? These woods were the favorite escape for the Pittsburgh department store owner, Edgar Kaufman, the father of Wright's Taliesin student. When young Edgar brought his father to commission a weekend home, he could hardly have imagined this. Falling water. Before a stone was laid, Wright wrote to Kaufman, the visit to the waterfall remains. A house has taken shape to the music of the stream. I thought you placed the home near the waterfall, not over it, Kaufman answered. I want you to live with your waterfall, Wright replied. Not just look at it, but for it to become an integral part of your lives. The actual boulder that had been the Kaufman's favorite family picnic spot above the waterfall now shouldered through the floor beside the hearth as the fulcrum of the house. It seemed natural for Wright to cantilever the house out from that rock. Inside and out, the masonry was cut and laid like the natural rock ledges of the stream-eroded cliff. The smooth, reinforced concrete balconies were painted a natural buff to blend with the woods. Falling water. A house at one with nature, in perfect harmony with its site, compounded out of numerous parts into one harmonious whole. This was the natural house, a house that welcomed the changes of the season. The horizontal sweeps of the cantilevered balconies and the vertical thrust of the stone and glass fireplace core anchored the house to its rocky ledge and echoed the plunge of white water over the falls. To Vincent Scully, falling water, like the Roby house before it, came to exemplify two persistent American themes. The first, of mobility, of flight, of getting away. The second, a rootedness, and security. To write, falling water grew out of this gorge like a plant.
How does nature build a tree? She builds it from the inside out. That's what organic architecture is. It's building the way nature builds.